And we're just waiting for all the participants to join. Everyone's in the middle of joining right now. Okay, it looks like some participants may continue to trickle in, but we can go ahead and start. Welcome everyone, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. I'm Mabel Harrow. I'm the Director of Donor Development at the Vellore Christian Medical College Foundation, based in New York City. On behalf of the foundation, I want to thank everyone for joining and our panelists this morning and evening. A few weeks ago, Dr. Chandra Singh, Associate Director at CMC Vellore, reached out to the foundation to help co-host today's webinar. And we are very excited to be here today. For over 70 years, the foundation has helped to connect individuals and organizations here in the US to CMC Vellore in support of their mission to be witness to the healing ministry of Christ through excellence in healthcare, education, and research. We are also dedicated to preserving CMC's founder, Dr. Ida Scudder, and her legacy. She instilled an ethos of kindness, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to providing both physical and spiritual healing to those in most need. It's an ethos we all live by to this day. So today we're very excited to help facilitate this presentation and discussion with Mr. Peter Greer, make some new connections and further our organization's commitment to Ida's legacy and remain true to her founding mission. So before I turn it over to Reverend Dr. Arul Das, I just want to go through a couple housekeeping items. I know many of us have been on many a Zoom call by now, but I just want to remind participants that you will be muted throughout this webinar. However, we do encourage you to send in your questions to Mr. Greer using the Q&A function, which you will find at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom control panel. You can hover your mouse over or your finger over the bottom of the screen and you'll see a menu pop up. There you will also see a chat option and raise your hand option. And you are welcome to use those. If you're having any technical issues or need assistance, we will help you through those two options. And yeah, without any further ado, I will turn it over to Reverend Dr. Arul Das, Head of Chaplaincy at CMC.
Thank you, Mabel. Shall we begin this evening, morning with a word of prayer? Let us pray. Loving and gracious Father, our hearts are united with you. We come in your presence, seeking your help and mercies upon us, as we always do. We depend on you for your healing touch. We seek your mercies upon today's talk by your servant. We thank you for using him in different places, in different contexts. Bless all the participants. May we receive your word through your servant. Thank you for the mission for which you have called us. Help us to remain true to your calling. bless us, bless Christian Medical College, and all the friends all over the world who join with us in this time of reflection and discussion. In Christ's precious name we pray. And also say a word of welcome to all of you on Christian Medical College, Vellore, and information from your city. And we are going to have Peter Greer for agreeing to speak to us on a very important theme, particularly as was going to this kind of pandemic. How to make food function. Of global development. For rivals.
Arul, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. It just seems your internet connection is breaking up a little bit, so it's difficult to hear.
Really, I'm sorry. Sorry.
Okay.
Am I audible now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay.
I think if you can get a little bit closer and
Sure.
start over again. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I was just mentioning Dr. Peter Greer has co-authored over 10 books, including Mission Bridge, Rooting for Rivals, Spiritual Dangers of People, we are talking so, and we are so grateful that today CNC is very happy that he has agreed to speak first. It's important that we have circulated this news to other Christian medical organizations who are currently we blessed by this meeting and thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Reverend Dr. Arul. Thank you so much for having me and for your words. And Mabel, thank you as well for your helping to pull this event together. And I have been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to the opportunity. And I think about the words of the Apostle Paul when he said, "Ever since I heard about your faith, I haven't stopped giving thanks for you." And that is how I feel on this opportunity to connect with all of you. When I hear about the work of healing, when I hear about the mission that you have, I say thank you to you, and I say thank you to the gods that called every single one of you. This is a special gift to be together. So what I want to do is to share some comments about a book called Mission Drift that I had been writing for several years. And after the book came out, have been learning more and more of what does it look like for us to have a long-term, faithful presence in the work that God has called us to do. And how can we make sure we protect that mission that God has given us? But what I'm most excited is I'm going to speak for about 25, 30 minutes. And then I really would like to keep the majority of our time today to hear what questions you have. So as Mabel said, if you have any questions, if there's anything that I can try to do to be helpful at any point, please try to enter those questions in the Q&A and we'll get through as many as we can. And if I am ever not clear, Mabel, I'll just look to you to let me know if we have any audio challenges or any technical challenges. But what a gift to be with you today. So thank you for the work that you are doing. And so this concept of mission drift, this concept has a very clear starting place for me. And the starting place for me was in Houston, Texas. And I was in Houston, Texas. And this is the moment when I started asking questions about what does it look like? What causes organizations to drift from their founding purpose and passion? And I want to tell you some of the things that I found, but I want to test out our chat roll feature. And so just now, maybe if you're able, enter in just one thing. What do you believe causes organizations to drift from their founding purpose? What causes drift to happen? What are some of the contributing factors that lead to drift? So if you're with someone in the room, you can talk to them. If you're in the chat roll, feel free to enter. But I'd be really curious to know, what is it that you believe causes drift for organizations to move away from their founding purpose? So I'll give you just a few seconds to think about that. What is it that causes drift? And Mabel, I'm not able, if I'm sharing my screen, to see the chat. Can you give me a couple of the ones that are coming in? Can you tell me some of the words that are coming in?
Yes, we have lack of focus, personal gain, compromise, selfishness, leadership quality, pressing needs at that point of time, short-term outlook, complacency, loss of vision becomes just a job, circumstance, fame, the founder is no longer in charge, becoming lukewarm in our own walk with God, transitioning to the new leadership and team and their interpretation of the organization's vision, not having God's priorities, loss of vision and prosperity and comfort, change in environment and societal expectations, taking Jesus away from your mission, resource crunch, catastrophic events like the pandemic, the wrong people in leadership, an unsupportive ecosystem, getting people who don't share the coming vision.
Mabel,
we'll have many more coming in.
Oh man, that's it. What a great list. And in some ways, you just told me we could end the webinar right now and we could just say, don't do all of those things and we would be good for the day. The challenge in this is there are so many small decisions that are made that any one decision is likely to not have a catastrophic impact on an organization. But the problem is if you take enough small steps over time, you can end up in a very different destination. And so that's what I want to talk a little bit more. What are some of the big steps? What are some of the big decisions that can lead an organization off mission? But you've already identified so many of them, and I appreciate that. But as I said, my eyes were open to this conversation when I was in Houston. I was in that building in the middle. I was on the top floor, and it was a beautiful building. We were overlooking the skyline of Houston. And while I was there doing a pitch for the organization that I work for, Hope International. We do Christ-centered micro-enterprise development. So we have savings groups and training to help individuals start small businesses to work their way out of poverty. And while we were there, I was doing a final pitch for the organization. And they said, Peter, we like your model. They said, Peter, we like where you're operating. We like so many aspects. But they said, you keep talking about the role of faith. You keep talking about Jesus. Just tell us that you will stop doing that and then we'll be able to fund you. And at that point, we were in a position where we needed funding. We were concerned about how we're going to make our budget. And this was the opportunity to say, water down your mission, and we will be able to give you a large check. And I wanted to find a way for that to happen. We ended up not getting that funding in good conscience. We couldn't say yes to that. But that foundation gave us the biggest gift that we've ever been given, because it was an opportunity to take a step back and to say, when we talk about Hope International, when we talk about our mission, is faith an add-on, or is faith at the very core? Is Jesus something that can be left aside to do the work, or is that at the very core of who we are? And it allowed us to recalibrate, to reconsider, to rediscover who we are as an organization, the very founding purpose and mission that we have as an organization. And similar to this, it also gave us the gift that we were able to look in our history books and realize that this decision would have been down a well-worn path of mission drift. Had we said yes, I believe that this would have started a path that would lead to mission drift. And we started researching this topic of mission drift, and we found that it is all over. Now, this is an individual. He is born in 270 AD in Turkey. He is known as celebrated around the world on December 25th for the Christian faith. This is an individual known as Saint Nicholas. And Saint Nicholas, also known as Santa Claus, something that is celebrating his faith, his generosity. But what I didn't know is that Saint Nicholas is also known as the patron saint of something that was surprising to me. It was the patron saint of pawn shops. Now, pawn shops in the United States are places that when I drive by, they typically are known as places that take advantage of people in poverty. They're known as places that when you have a moment, you can go and you can get some short-term money, but they are not looking out for your best interest. But I was surprised to see that pawn shops, when you trace their history back, that pawn shops were created as a tool for the church to care for individuals in poverty. They were created by the Franciscans as a way for individuals to go if you had a need and to have support to get you through your poverty. And today, even in the logo of pawn shops, those three purses, it ties back to the story of St. Nicholas, but it does not tie back to the core mission of helping people in their moment of need as an outreach of the church to care for people in poverty. Now, that's not just in pawn shops. It's not just in a tool that was created by the church to help people in their moment of need. We also see this in organizations as well, and organizations that we see as well. But the starting point for organizations to stay on mission, I believe, is that they see this issue of drift and they believe that it happens. They believe that that story about pawn shops, it's not just a story about one instance. This is across the medical world. This is across the Christian education world. This is across nonprofits. This is across businesses. And so when we started our research, we interviewed everyone that had a long-term faithful presence, 50 years of faithful commitment to their founding mission, and we tried to understand what is it that they believe and what is it that they do. How have they been able to pass on that mission to the next generation? And I want to share three big findings from our research, and this is with leaders from around the world. This is across sectors. But the first thing that they all had in common, those organizations that stayed on mission, is the first is that they believe that drift happens. And not just that they believe that drift happens in the past, but drift is happening in the present. And that if there is not careful attention, if there is not thoughtful and prayerful work, that the natural way that organizations will go is to drift. And I love that word drift because it's like a current. It's like a current. And if anyone has spent time in water, whether it's a stream or whether it's the ocean, you know that there are currents. And you know that if you just relax, if you just don't pay attention, that currents will take you, and they don't always take you where they want to go. My family loves going to the ocean. We are a few hours away from the Atlantic Ocean, where I live in Pennsylvania, and we love playing in the waves. And every time when you go on the beach where we live, you see these signs that talk about something called currents and riptides. And our family was there one day. We'd been there many other days. I was playing with my son, and in a moment, my son got caught in a riptide, and he was about 10 years old, and he was pulled out into the ocean so fast. I looked up and I saw him moving away in this current, and I was doing my best to try to get to him. A lifeguard ended up jumping in and ended up getting him, but I will never look at those signs of the danger of a riptide, the danger of a current. I will never look at those signs the same way because my son was caught in them. And in a similar way, I now believe that there are currents that are all around us. There are currents that we are seeing, there are currents that we are in, and if we do not pay attention to those currents, we're going to wake up one day and we're going to be so far from our original destination. And so consider this. This is a well-known university in the United States, but their mission statement at the beginning was this: to be plainly instructed and consider well that the main end of your life and studies is to know God and Jesus Christ. Now, again, if you believe that there are currents all around us, there was not careful consideration of the cultural currents. And so this was the founding mission statement. And today it still exists. I had the privilege of going to this university, and you can see in stone that etched, there are words that talk about the founding mission, but it no longer is doing what it was created to do. It is Harvard University. And what was etched in stone was never passed on to the next generation. And it's interesting to look at Harvard's story and to realize what it was created to be. And it still is doing world-class education, but it's lost its core. It's lost the very core of what it was created to be. 100 years after the founding of Harvard, there was a group of people that saw that Harvard was experiencing mission drift. And so they moved south, they moved to Connecticut, and they founded Yale University as a university that would not drift. And so what we found, though, what happened to Harvard happened to Yale, and I believe it's happening today. It's just hard to see it because it is a slow-moving current that is causing organizations to drift. And we see this woven in the Old and New Testament as well. In the Old Testament, Joshua makes this bold declaration. He makes this bold declaration that as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. He says, we will not drift. We will be faithful to the call. And then we turn one page and we turn 2 pages and we read this. After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. This is the grandchildren of Joshua. This is the grandchildren of the most miraculous rescue, that Joshua sees all of this incredible rescue, and yet it was not passed to the next generation. What we see is what author Paul Tripp talks about, that the passions of the first generation become the preferences of the second generation, and they become irrelevant to the third generation. This story of drift is a common story. It cuts across geographies, it cuts across sectors, and I believe it is alive. So for you, with the organizations that you're with. I'd love to see just in the chat roll again. And Mabel, maybe you can just read some of these again if you'd be willing to. But if this is true, if drift is slow, if drift is difficult to see, if the currents are taking us, what would be signs of mission drift in your organization? What would you see? How would you know if the organizations that you care about are starting to drift? I'd love to hear just a few responses of what would be signs of mission drift for your organization?
So I'll start reading some out loud. A lack of prayer, not sharing Jesus with patients, political correctness, vision of founders considered irrelevant, pleasing the crowd more than Jesus, taking a tangential path, priority to funds, hesitation for the gospel, a lack of ownership of mission in community, emphasis on logic and reason as opposed to faith, focusing away from people to structures, dropping Jesus Christ from the mission statement, internal conflicts, focus excessively on outcomes rather than the means, intellectual superiority, glorifying oneself, fear of offending others, on and on.
Mayo, that is awesome. I love all of these responses. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And so this is really interesting to me, that even in this webinar, even in this conversation with all of you right now, we were able to say, here's what causes drift. We're able to say, here are the signs of drift. And my guess is any organization there's a group of people that can do this. There's a group of people that can say, this is what drift looks like. And if that is true, the question that is so concerning to me is, if it is so easy to identify drift, and if it's so easy to identify cause of drift, then why is there still so much drift happening? Why is it? And I can tell you, in our research, it was so much easier to find stories of organizations that had drifted than it was to find organizations that had remained mission true. I'm not exaggerating. It was so much easier when we looked in the history books, when we started interviewing. It was easy. It was simple to find organizations that had a clear and compelling Christian mission when they're founded and yet no longer have it. And it was really hard to find organizations that had grown, that had professionalized, that had done all of this work and kept the vibrancy of their core mission. And why is that? Why is it? And I think part of the reason is because this conversation that we're having, it just doesn't happen on a regular basis. We take it for granted that of course people know our mission. Of course people are here. Of course we're not going to drift. And I would just say, watch out, be on guard, make sure that we are vigilant, because it is far easier to drift than it is to stay mission true. So I want to share two more real quickly before we get to questions of things that we consistently heard. The first was they believe that drift happens. They believe that their organization could drift if they didn't do the work. The second thing that we hear is that there was clarity of mission. They knew why they existed, and they did everything possible to make that not a historical document, but a living document, something that was woven into the practices and habits of the organization. I was with a group of philanthropists, some of the most brilliant business leaders that I've ever met. And I was asking them about this issue of, what have you done to make sure that the companies that you're with, the nonprofits that you serve with, and your family foundation stays on mission? And all of them said essentially this. I said, I guess I don't really like thinking about the time when I'll be gone. They don't like thinking about the time when they won't be in the seat of decision making. And because they don't like thinking about that, they had not planned, they had not prepared for the next generation. They had not thought about how to stay mission true because they didn't like thinking about it. And I think about this as a relay race. I think about all of us, whether you're the founder or whatever your role is, there is going to be a moment when you will pass the baton on to the next runner. None of us are running an event that we are solo, other than our lives. Every other aspect, every other organization, we are entrusted with leadership for a time. Every single one of us is temporary in our roles. We have a baton, and the question is, are we going to be able to successfully pass that on to the next generation? And if we're not having a vision that extends beyond ourselves, we're not going to do the work to preserve the mission that we care so passionately about. And so the question for you is, what are you going to do to keep your founding purpose alive? How are you going to pass the mission to the next generation of leaders? What are you going to do to make sure this is not a historical document that an archaeologist will find in the founding document, but what are you doing to make this a living, breathing part of who you are? I know there are organizations that every time the board gathers, that they read the mission together and they make decisions in light of that. I know there are teams that do a lot of work when new staff come on to make sure that the stories that are told are stories about the core purpose. Even for Hope International, when we have staff meetings, we have these vignettes that we tell about the stories that we want everyone to know about who we are as an organization, that aren't just about what we do, but about why we do it. And so the question is, what do you have in place to make sure your passion, your primary purpose as an organization isn't some relic that is tucked away in some folder somewhere, but it is a living, breathing, that new staff coming in know why, that you recruit for mission, that you have this as a core part of how you make decisions. And with this, we know that the world is changing. So how do we make sure that even when we make decisions about changed programs or approaches, that we make them in light of our mission? And I thought about this recently because COVID is causing all of us to change. All of us are changing our programs and our methodologies. But the question is, how do we make these pivots? How do we make these changes in light of our mission? How do we make sure that the changes we're making help us to better deliver the core products and services that we have, to help us be better at implementing our mission? And I thought about an example of a stagecoach company that was founded in the United States, and it existed to build to manufacture stagecoaches. Now, if that organization were still only making stagecoaches, this organization would probably not be doing well today. But this organization, in their founding documents, they realized that stagecoaches were the means that they accomplished their mission. Their core mission was actually, here's a way that we can make sure that we are transporting what is most valuable. And so this company has changed. They still have it in their logo of a stagecoach, but their mission right now is to make sure that they are transporting what matters most for individuals. And so that is the second piece, the last piece, this intentionality of practice. And Mabel, can I just make sure audio, are we still okay on audio?
Yes, we're good.
All right, perfect.
You perfectly.
So the last one is, if we believe that drift happens, if we are doing everything possible to have clarity of our mission, then the third piece is, are we having intentionality of practice? And this simply means, are the small decisions that we're making, are they done in light of our mission? And so this comes down to people. Are we recruiting the right people into the organization? Are we training and developing them beyond just the technical proficiencies? Are we making sure that we're doing everything possible to make sure that they are in line with the mission? It has to do with the metrics. What do we celebrate as an organization? What are we doing to reinforce? Is it all about numbers and growth, or is it also about quality of service and the way that we're living our mission? One of my greatest failures as an organization leader was I was so excited about organizational growth that I did not pay attention to underlying mission fulfillment. And so we grew very, very quickly. And the result was we just had a bigger mess to clean up. Growth without mission fulfillment is not good growth. And so making sure that we measure what matters. Funding, making sure it's in alignment with our mission. And policies and practices and culture, those things matter. And so it's not one specific decision, but it's rather how do we have this conversation about mission drift permeate everything that we do as an organization, that it influences the way that we think about people, it influences what we measure, it influences what we celebrate, and it influences all of the decisions that we make. Now, I said I was going to talk for 30 minutes. I've gone a little over 30 minutes. I want to keep our remaining 20 minutes to see what questions you have on that, but I would love to open it up for conversation. And just before that, maybe Mabel, you can again read the questions that come in for all of us. I'm going to skip through some other things, but I do want to just let you know that if anyone is interested, we did create a free workbook that allows you and your leadership team to go through these principles of mission drift in greater detail. There's more exercises to consider, and I would love to make that available to anyone. So we can figure out the best way to get that to all of you. But there is a workbook that if you're interested in taking those next steps, it is free for any of you. And also, before we get to questions, again, this is just my information. And truly, I want to end where I started, that if there's anything that I can do to cheer you on in the good and important work that you are doing, I would love to do it. I am so grateful for the work that you are doing to bring healing throughout India, and would love to cheer you on and support you in that work. So those are my comments, and love to see if there are any questions that this prompts or any way that I can try and be helpful.
Hi, Dr. Samuel, you are muted.
So thank you, Peter. It was really wonderful and very meaningful, very soul-searching and introspective. And thank you, Foundation, for organizing this. Peter, it's very coincidental that while we are in this pandemic, as you rightly said, it can make us vulnerable to mission drift. And also, it is coincidental that in the last few years, there have been a series of milestones, especially for CMC Vellore. In the 2018, it was the 100th year of a medical education. In the year 2019, it was 200th year where the Scudder family stepped in India for starting their missionary work. And this year being the 120th year of our institution, and also happens to be the 150th year of Dr. Ida's birth anniversary. A series of milestones. We are amidst a pandemic, and we thank God that it's been a blessing that we are listening to you, especially on a very crucial topic like mission drift, where it is very easy for any organization, and we have a representation of a network of organizations of CMC across India. And as I see on my screen, there are 139 participants available. So without taking much time, we should go ahead and see how we are moving on with our QA sessions. And we have a question which has come from one person. It says, can Harvard turn back to its original mission? Since you mentioned they are drifted. We can't hear you, Peter. You're muted. Yeah.
Those are significant milestones, Dr. Samuel. Congratulations on those. And I can't think of a better time to actually be reevaluating mission, where you've come from in the last 100 or 120 or 150 years, and to imagine what is the next century, what is the next 100 years look like of faithful obedience to what God has given. So yeah, the question on Harvard is an interesting one, because in our research, what we found is that there is a point of no return, that there is a point with which returning to the original mission becomes impossible. And I think that's part of the urgency, that there's all kinds of examples of drifting away from mission. There are no examples of somehow drifting back to that original mission. So the sooner you take action, the sooner you clarify, the sooner you have intentionality of practice, the better you're able to protect that core mission. So the best time to focus on mission drift is the day of founding. The second best day is today. What can you do today to clarify, to recalibrate, to focus on that core mission? So within Harvard, I don't think as an institution, there is a possibility of going back. That is unimaginable to me. But by God's grace, I can also tell you, God is at work there too. And so even with drift, God is still at work in a really special and significant way. And I saw that, I experienced that. And so even in cases of drift, it doesn't mean that God is not at work either. So wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. There's one more question which I can see on the screen here. Deepak and Ashita Singh, they are working in a mission hospital in Maharashtra, and they have posted a question. Please give some example metrics to use for measure mission trueness in a setting.
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I am not a medical practitioner at all. I have a doctor's appointment that I'm going to later this morning, and I'm so glad for medical professionals. I am not a medical professional, so I don't know the metrics that would be most appropriate for you. But I can tell you with Hope International, the organization that I run, that initially it was about number of people served. It was about growth rates. It was about the amount of capital that we were investing. And the reason why we measured them is because we wanted to serve more people, and that's good. But I believe that growth is not the first thing that we should look at. And it's the easiest to measure. And so oftentimes in the sectors that we are, it's like, let's just measure growth because growth is good, right? And I don't believe that is necessarily true. So we shifted our metrics, and now we have measurements of Christ-centeredness, our mission, then we have quality, and then we have growth. And we always talk about them sequentially. So for us, Christ-centeredness, what does that actually mean for us? I love how someone said earlier, one of the signs of drift is when we stop praying together. Is there a vibrant community for us that prays together for the work? Then we have these measurements about, have there been opportunities for us to actively share the hope of Christ that is at the core of who we are? We talk about the way in which we do our operations. Do we have partnerships with the local churches? Is that still a critical part of our mission? So Christ-centeredness first, then quality, because I believe if we say we are followers of Jesus, and then if we end up actually offering poor service, we undermine the credibility of our mission. So we've got to make sure that our mission is reinforced with excellence in everything that we do. So there we have institutional effectiveness. We have net promoter score, essentially, in the equivalent of the medical professional, are the people that receive service, are they really grateful for the way they were treated? Would they tell others about our service? So Christ-centeredness, quality, and then growth in that order.
Yeah, thank you. We have one more coming up. It says, in the work of missions, how do leaders and organizations avoid succumbing to frustration and fatigue when results are often very long-term and nebulous?
Oh, I feel like I am the wrong person to answer that question, but I can tell you that I am writing a book on that right now, and part of the reason why is because of that question. It's because we can't have long-term faithful organizations if we don't have long-term faithful people. And I have seen that there's a cycle that when it is difficult, when results are there, it is easy to go into a stage of disillusionment, of feeling despondent, of feeling discouraged. It's possible to go into a stage of cynicism, meaning this is too difficult, this is never going to work, the government's too complex, this is impossible, and to give up. And yet I find that there are examples of people that have a long-term faithful presence that have found a way to realize this is more difficult than we ever thought. This is really, really hard. And they've found a way to still hold on to hope in the midst of it and to still work for long-term change. And I am not looking for the stories that we're telling are not stories in the United States of America, because I have seen my global brothers and sisters live this out in a way that I want to learn from, I want to emulate. And so, Dr. Samuel, if anyone comes to mind to you or anyone else, we're looking for those people that have that long-term faithful presence in the midst of some really big challenges and circumstances. And I want to learn from them. But I also see that in Scripture. We see that in Hebrews 11, right? That list of people that never got what they were looking for this side of eternity, but still they were faithful until the end. And I want that to be my story. I want that to be our story, that we faithfully served until the end, no matter how hard it got. So more to come on that, but I'd love to learn from you and the people that you know that have had that long-term faithful presence.
Thank you. There's one from Hans D. The question is, if there is mission drift, what should the members of the organization do? Are the steps we as members need to do with the board of that mission? And also the second question is, how do we get that free workbook you spoke about, and whether we can download it from your website?
Yeah, so thanks for that. And I mean, part of the reason we created the workbook was exactly for that question. Because in Element, what we found, and we just created the workbook last month, and we wrote Mission Drift 5 years ago, but over the last 5 years, we've heard from many organizations that say, I get it, I see it, I want